A light rain falls over Neon Valley, a town where people talk more than they listen, and it's easier to insult than to apologize. Every window is open, the comforting sounds of podcasts wafting from it. You're not to blame. The world is cruel to you. Many adults listen to it before bed, like a temporary fix for pain. But Taidy, an 8-year-old girl, prefers walking through the quiet town to listening to her podcast. She begins to notice something. Why do people seem less happy the more they listen? The more people listen to comforting content, they become more easily angered each day. And that makes her a little afraid of this town. One day, on her way home, Taidy saw an old man carrying a large black garbage bag. But strangely, the bag had a voice, speaking loudly. "It's all his fault! I'm not guilty! Others ruined my life!" Taidy frowned. "What are you collecting, sir?" The man smiled faintly. "Garbage." "But it can talk." She had never seen garbage like this before. The old man stopped walking slowly, then turned and gave the girl a weak smile. The smile looked weary, like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time. A cold wind swept through the narrow alley. The old man clutched the garbage bag tighter before speaking in a low, even voice. "Yes, because it's the garbage people throw out of their mouths." Suddenly, the sounds inside the bag grew louder and louder. Angry words, blame words, words that shifted the blame to others. Taidy silently observed the Neon Valley. The lights were still as beautiful as ever. The podcast still blasted from every room. But for the first time, she felt that the city might be dirtier than it appeared. Is this city really that dirty? The old man's name was Morwen. Every night, he would collect the words humans used to blame others. Because every time someone threw the blame away from themselves, it truly became a pile of trash. At first, Taidy thought it was funny. Adults just complain. Morwen shook his head. Every word carries weight. Until Morwen slowly opened a black trash bag. Inside were thousands of glowing scraps of paper. Each sheet contained a sentence that sounded heavy in the heart. It was as if the entire city was throwing its guilt away here. Taidy slowly picked up the scraps of paper. Each sheet was filled with blame and regret. If my mother were rich, I would be happy. This country has made me a failure. My boss ruined my life. My ex-boyfriend has made me distrust everyone. Those voices lingered around her like a heavy fog. Morwen looked at the girl silently before asking softly, "Do you know why people these days can't sleep?" Taidy shook her head. The old man sighed slowly. "Because they throw everything away, except themselves." Those words strangely weighed on Taidy's heart. That night, Taidy came home later than usual. But what she heard was like the noise in a garbage bin. Her mother was complaining about her father. It's all his fault. Her father was complaining about the government. The government is the one who makes life miserable. Her brother was complaining about the entire internet. The internet is so annoying. No one was saying, "What should I fix?" The girl lay silently staring at the ceiling. The rain continued to fall softly outside the window, but her heart was more troubled than ever. And for the first time in her life, Taidy couldn't sleep. That night, Morwen took Taidy to a tall building in the city center. What is this place? The building had a strange name, the Good People's Residence. A tall building filled with what she considered to be kind people. Every window was lit up, and every room was playing the same podcast. You're tired because the world doesn't understand you. The voice drifted along with the rain, like a lullaby for someone who doesn't want to face reality. Taidy looked up at the building silently. Though it looked warm from the outside, something inside made her feel cold.
Taidy slowly walked through each room. A woman was recording a video teaching people self-love. Love yourselves a lot, everyone. But the moment she ended the camera, she angrily yelled at a delivery person. Why is the food so slow? In another room, a man who spoke of positivity all day long was gritting his teeth, looking at pictures of successful people on his phone. His eyes were filled with envy. Those people are just showing off their wealth. Taidy began to feel confused and quietly asked, why do people who talk about happiness all the time seem sadder than before? Morwen replied, because sometimes healing that doesn't bring us back to ourselves is just an emotional sleep aid. And the deeper she walked into the building, the heavier the air felt. Suddenly, Morwen's garbage bag grew heavier. Complaints, anger, and blame poured out like sewage. The world is unfair. No one understands me. Those words filled the hallway. Taidy slowly backed away, her heart trembling. She began to feel that the city was drowning in something invisible. Something sweet, like comforting words, but slowly weakening people, little by little. And for the first time, the girl began to fear the city's bedtime podcasts.
That night, after the vase broke, the whole house was filled with a heavy silence. My mother slowly picked up the pieces of the vase, without saying a word. But her face was full of exhaustion, like someone who felt like they were constantly dragging something heavy through their life. My father sat in a corner of the room, watching a comforting video on his phone after work. A woman's voice in the video spoke softly, as if soothing the listener's heart. You're not wrong for being tired. It's the world that expects too much from you. My father nodded slightly before letting out a long sigh, like someone on the verge of breaking down. Taidy watched the two adults silently and began to feel that maybe the adults weren't cruel. They were just too tired to accept that sometimes the root cause of suffering was their unwillingness to change themselves.
In the middle of the night, Taidy heard soft crying from the kitchen. Her mother was alone, head down. I'm tired. Why does no one understand me? Her voice trembled slightly, like someone who had been trying to be strong for too long. Her father sat silently opposite her. Before speaking softly, have you ever tried to understand anyone? The room fell silent. Her mother let out a short laugh. But it was a laugh filled with sorrow. Even you blame me. Her father didn't answer, because he knew it was true. In this town, everyone wants to be understood, but no one wants to be the one to start understanding first. And perhaps that's why everyone becomes more isolated every day. The next morning, Taidy found her father asleep at his desk. The computer screen was still on. A message had been typed, but never posted. Maybe I don't hate the world. I'm just disappointed that I didn't have the courage to change my life. The girl stared at the message for a long time. Then, for the first time, she began to understand something. Adults hurt too, don't they? Many adults aren't angry at the world because they want to be cruel to anyone. They're simply hurting, so much so that they don't dare look directly into their own hearts. 3 days later, Neon Valley began to change strangely. A new coffee shop called You Deserve Better had become the town's hottest spot. Every table was filled with people talking about self-love, about healing hearts, and not letting anyone hurt their feelings. But the longer Taidy watched, the more she felt that people were smiling with tired eyes. It was as if everyone was trying to comfort themselves, forgetting that they were hurting others. A middle-aged woman is recording a video teaching people to love themselves. If someone makes you unhappy, cut them out of your life immediately. But the moment she ends the camera, she calls to scold her daughter about her grades. A working man shares a post encouraging the world. Don't let anyone put you down. But an hour later, he's yelling at a new employee at his company. You can't even do this simple job properly. The whole city starts to look like a strange play. Everyone is playing the role of victim, and the longer they play, the more they forget that they are also inflicting wounds on others. Taidy begins to feel that the sadness of this city is spreading everywhere like a thick fog. Late at night, Taidy and Morwen walked past the city's tall buildings. Even though it was 2 a.m, the lights were still on in every room. No one was asleep. Only the comforting sounds of podcasts drifted from the windows. You don't need to change for anyone, Morwen said slowly. Do you know why this kind of content is so popular? Because it's so comforting? No. He stopped walking. Because humans are addicted to the feeling of being right. A cold wind blew through the narrow alley. Suddenly, the garbage bag on Morwen's back began to move violently, as if something was struggling inside. A chorus of voices mingled inside. I'm like this because of my family. Society sucks. I have no choice. Taidy began to feel nauseated, because deep down, every sentence sounds true. And that was the most terrifying thing about this city. That night, the rain poured down so heavily that the entire city seemed to be submerged. Morwen led Taidy down beneath the city through an old tunnel. The damp smell and the sound of dripping water made the place seem like the belly of a giant, living creature. Before they arrived at a massive secret room, the walls were covered in wires, thousands of screens, and the number of podcast listeners increased every second. What is this place? A place where the entire city sleeps, escaping reality. Why is it so terrifying? Taidy froze. On the large screen in the center of the room was the name of the city's #1 show. Tonight, you are innocent. And suddenly, she began to feel herself getting closer to a truth she shouldn't know. Morwen slowly sat down in front of the old microphone, and his voice changed instantly. From a quiet old man, it became a warm, comforting voice, like a hug, like a priest who knew how to speak to human loneliness. You've had a long day, haven't you? Close your eyes. It's the world that's been cruel to you. Taidy's face instantly turned pale. Uncle, is that you? This was the same voice that echoed from every window in the city. The voice that comforted people every night. The voice that made everyone feel better, without changing anything. The girl slowly backed away, because she had just realized that the one who collected the garbage of words was the one who created it all. Morwen slowly removed his headphones. Yes, it's me. Why do you have to do this? He chuckled softly, the laugh of someone who had long lost faith in humanity. Because the truth doesn't sell, Taidy. But lies that make people feel good always sell. He pointed to the screen. The number of listeners increased every second. People don't want to grow up, Taidy. They just want someone to tell them, you don't have to take
any responsibility. The entire town was falling asleep to his voice. But when Taidy asked, "And are you happy?" the room fell silent. Morwen sat still for a long time. Before answering in a hoarse voice, "I get older every year, but I sleep less than 2 hours a day." And for the first time, Taidy saw that the person who comforted the whole world might be the most broken person in this town.
After learning the truth about Morwen, Taidy began to see people differently. She saw teachers talking about morality in class, but secretly gossiping about their fellow teachers during lunchtime. She saw motivational speakers talking about kindness. We should be kind to each other. But then, off the stage, they angrily lashed out at their crew. "You messed up this simple task?" The whole town started to look like a big play. Everyone was saying beautiful things, but deep down, they were filled with exhaustion, anger, and disappointment that had never been truly resolved. She began to hate everyone, including herself. One day, a boy at school pushed Taidy, causing her to fall in front of everyone. Laughter filled the room. "Ha ha! She fell again!" The girl's heart trembled. It felt like something inside was breaking. She slowly got up, before shouting back the harshest words of her life. "Stop laughing! I hate you guys!" The room fell silent. The boy began to cry. But instead of feeling victorious, Taidy felt a heavy weight on her chest. It was as if her heart was stained with something indelible. That night, Taidy couldn't sleep again. She sat silently on the floor, hugging her knees, and she began to understand the town's most terrifying secret. Blaming others? It's addictive. Blaming others makes humans feel clean. The more you blame, the more you feel right, when in reality, your heart is slowly breaking. Taidy's tears flowed silently. Or maybe I'll become like them. For the first time, she began to fear that one day she might become like every adult in this town. One night, Morwen took Taidy to an old, abandoned building by the river. A light rain fell on the broken windows of the old building. Inside the small room, there was only an old iron bed and many cassette tapes. Where is this? Morwen looked around the room silently, before speaking in a voice softer than usual. "This is the orphanage where I grew up. It looks so lonely." Taidy slowly looked at the room and began to feel that Morwen's loneliness still lingered in every wall. Taidy listened silently. "When I was a child, I used to blame the world, because the world was truly cruel." Morwen smiled sadly. "But one day, I realized that even blaming the whole world, life wouldn't get any better." Morwen slowly put the old tape into the player. A soft, crackling sound filled the room. Before the voice of a young boy came out. "It would be nice if someone could comfort me every night." Taidy froze. She recognized that voice. It was the same voice as Morwen's now. The old man closed his eyes silently, before speaking with a sad smile. "When I was a child, I thought if someone told me that I wasn't at fault, I wouldn't hurt anymore." The rain continued to fall softly. It was as if the whole city was silently listening to the sorrowful story of a child. Morwen sat down beside the pile of audio tapes. His eyes looked weary, like someone who had been lost for too long. "So I created that sound myself," he said. "At first, I just wanted to help lonely people. But then people started getting used to the comforting words. I started saying what they wanted to hear." Taidy watched the old man silently. And for the first time, she understood something deeper than before. Some demons are not born from evil, but from pain that no one has ever been able to heal. The following night, a new podcast episode was quietly released. No promotion, no warm background music like usual. The entire city listened as normal. But the first thing they heard was a long silence. Before Taidy's voice slowly broke the silence. "Tonight, I won't comfort you." Many were about to close the app immediately. But the girl continued, her voice trembling slightly, as if she were speaking to the hearts of the entire city at once. Because maybe what we need isn't comforting words, but perhaps the courage to admit that we too have hurt others.
Taidy's voice echoed throughout Neon Valley. She wasn't talking about positivity. She wasn't saying everyone was a victim of the world. She was simply speaking the truth that no one wanted to hear. Parents who blame their children. Children who blame their parents. Lovers who blame each other until the love is gone. People on the internet who insult others to make themselves feel superior. Everyone is tired because no one is willing to lay down their weapons first. The town fell strangely silent. Many homes were free of the usual nightly arguments. Instead, many people sat still, listening to their own hearts for the first time in years. That night, many people wept silently in their rooms. Some realized that they hadn't been angry at the world all along. They were simply disappointed in themselves, too disappointed to look it in the eye. And to escape that pain, they threw it at others, over and over again. Taidy stood silently gazing at the city from the rooftop. The neon lights of the valley were still as beautiful as ever. But for the first time, the entire city was quiet enough to hear their own true voice.
The next morning, Neon Valley was quieter than usual. Morwen's podcast had disappeared from all platforms. There was no announcement of his departure. No explanation was given. No one knew where he had gone. Only the final episode remained, being played repeatedly throughout the city. Taidy walked slowly past her usual coffee shop. People were still going about their lives, some of them as before. People were still complaining. People were still angry. The internet drama was still the same. The world didn't change that easily. But deep down, she was beginning to feel that the city was breathing a little differently. Even though the city is still chaotic, something small is beginning to happen. A man was about to yell at a coffee shop employee, but he stopped himself mid-sentence. Wait, did I go too far? Maybe he didn't mean it. A woman was about to post a public denouncement of her ex before she paused and deleted the entire message. I should delete this post. A teenager slowly turned off their phone and sat quietly, lost in thought for the first time in years. No one becomes a good person overnight, but some are beginning to ask themselves, or perhaps some problems can be solved starting with ourselves. That night, Neon Valley was still filled with sleepless nights. There were still people blaming the world, blaming life, and blaming each other as usual. But it wasn't the same as before, because some people were beginning to be quiet enough to truly listen to their inner voices. And when humans stop running away from themselves for a moment, they might discover that accepting one's own mistakes doesn't make us weak, but it might be the first time the heart truly rests. From the high rooftop, Taidy watched the silent city. No one knew where Morwen had gone. Or perhaps he was still somewhere picking up the remnants of hurtful words. In a city where people still have to practice apologizing to themselves before learning to forgive others. The silence before closing your eyes. Years later, Taidy grew up and became a bedtime storyteller. But she never sold cheap comfort. She never told her listeners, "You're not wrong." She simply whispered softly every night, "Everyone makes mistakes, but those who dare to accept themselves won't spend the night blaming others." And strangely enough, the more people listened to her stories, the quieter the town became. Because ultimately, what allows humans to sleep most soundly may not be believing they are good enough, but perhaps knowing that tomorrow we can still be better.